Will please, Your Lordship. Lords, I adopt whatever my learned colleagues have said, Lords, with appreciation and gratitude. I'm only picking out some first principles, my Lords, that would, I believe, assist Your Lordships in coming to a conclusion, which essentially, as I understand, is simply in the backdrop of whatever has been explained to Your Lordships, whether the establishment word used in Article 30 leads to a situation in which everything is there except the actual act of establishing it by an act of parliament. Does that take away? So, my lords, essentially, there are three propositions that I'm placing before your lordships. My lords, very, very briefly, in a few minutes, the backdrop of Aligarh Muslim University. My lords, your lordships have been told how Sir Syed Ahmad pursued the establishment first of an MAO college, and then his followers pursued the establishment of the university. Well, the matter begins with 1957, and the Sir Syed wrote out this great book, the treatise about the reasons for the uprising, the mutiny, or what we call independence, the war of independence, the first war of independence. And thereafter, one of the important causes for him, as he found, was the backwardness of Muslim community, particularly the educational backwardness of the Muslim community. So he set out to bring about education. He had already set up something called the Scientific Society, the purpose of which was to translate scientific books into Urdu so that they could be made accessible to the community and make the community more aware of what the scientific developments were happening. And that was Sir Syed. He then, my lords, after 1857, he visited Oxford University. He tried to absorb and understand how a good university could be made. And then, of course, the same designs of Oxford University were reproduced in the architectural plans of what was MAO College and then Aligarh University. Of course, we didn't have colleges as Oxford and Cambridge have, but the buildings were designed around what are called halls of residence. It was to be a residential university, so there were halls of residence, each hall having very eminent background and each hall having a particular character. So, my lords, there is what is called in Aligarh an Aligarh Tehzeeb. It's very important. And I'm saying all this, my lords, because I have a sentimental attachment to Aligarh. I was born in the Vice Chancellor's house, therefore I do have a claim sentimentally on Aligarh. But be that as it may, my lords, there's a particular tehzeeb translates into culture or a subculture that Aligarh represents. I do believe there's a culture in every great institution. Lordships know culture in every great institution, but Aligarh has a unique culture, which a great deal has to do with ability to speak, ability to propound, ability to interact, ability to imagine, and to project. My lords, this is seen right through the Aligarh University's culture. Well, lords, so when the university is established, your lordships have also already seen that it was established with the effort of the community. And therefore, I distinguish in first principle two kinds of establishments, well, lords, two kinds of statutory acts that may be propounded by government. One is a non-consensual act, where, my lords, an institution that has fallen on bad times, where there is widespread talk of corruption, that people are not being served as they should be served, and the government steps in to say that in order to save this institution, we need to take it over. And they take over that institution. It's a non-consensual necessarily. But there can also be a consensual takeover, which is exactly what Aligarh was about, where everybody gathered and said, please convert us into a university. And as Mr. Kapil Sibal just argued, all those assets and the entitlements of MAO College were handed over to the university. Malad, two things have happened. When Aligarh Muslim University Act was passed in 1920, it was not assumed that there would be a difference between two different kinds of universities, which we now have become familiar with, private university and a public university. Your lordships asked what minority institutions or university level institutions are there. And it seems that Aligarh being one, provided your lordships agree with us, Jamia University is the second one, dependent on whatever the decision will happen in Aligarh. Jamia was a breakaway offshoot of Aligarh. Jamia was part of the independence movement because in the independence movement, it was felt that whatever...
Khurshid, we're not dealing with Jamia's case because that's a separate matter. So if you want to go into that, maybe expanding the scope of the reference.
Well, I'm only saying that your lordships asked me if there were more than Aligarh institutions that were likely or felt to be minority institutions. Jamia is one, but that's also in litigation, and I do believe in the High Court.
From Jamia, any other examples in the country?
Well, it's the other there are other examples. In fact, the other side has produced some examples. Those are all so-called private universities. Well, there's the Mahavir Jain University. There is the Christ University, Christ College. Your lordships mentioned Vellore Medical College. Now, what has happened there is most of the Christian institutions either are like St. Stephen's College within a larger complex of a university, or they are all deemed universities. So, my lords, if you start with a school, you start with possibly a society that is registered under the Registration Act. From the society, you develop a college that is also under Registration Act and whatever affiliation is provided. The college then could possibly become deemed university. Nothing happens. The character is preserved throughout. It's just the transformation from a deemed university to a full university when the question marks come. Your lordships asked about Jamia. Jamia retained that character without any question while it was a deemed university. The moment Jamia became a full university, Jamia also came under the same question mark that now is placed before Aligarh University. So, my lords, the private universities are there, but just for your lordships' information, the private universities that are treated as minority institutions has a slight tweaking from the model of Aligarh. Well, Aligarh model was that everything that was owned by the societies was handed over. Jamia did the same thing, was handed over to the university, and the societies were dissolved. What the private universities now are doing is that the society doesn't get dissolved. The society retains whatever it has, but the society comes under the umbrella of a university, and the society is told the conditions, if once they are met, the government should be informed that the conditions are met, and on meeting those conditions, the university will come into operation. So today, the dichotomy is that you can have a private university, provided your lordships at some stage in this matter or elsewhere hold that just the fact that the university has been established in inverted commas by an act of parliament or an act of the state legislature will not deny it its minority character. That finding hasn't yet come. But if there is such a finding, then private universities would exist. But as far as we understand, from our point of view, if your lordships decide against us and in favor of Aziz Basha, as decided by the bench of 5 judges, then we couldn't, one way or the other, get a private university or a public university that would have the tag of being a minority university. So that's very critical. And well, for this purpose, what I'm asking your lordships to do is to consider that when a society is registered, you can get together and could be a group of people, unorganized people, etc., can set up a school. But in order to get legal identity or legal entity or legal personality, they have to register themselves as a society. And the registration is under a statute. The registration is an act, the lowercase act ACT of the government or of the state, and yet it continues to be recognized as a private university. Here, the moment you go beyond a deemed university and you ask for being made into a full university, your lordships have already heard it can only be done through an act of parliament, and therefore the moment it's done through by act of parliament, you lose your. So you're giving by one hand under Article 31 and taking back by the other hand by saying, well, if you're constituted or you are established or you're formed. So if your lordships were to use the meaning of founded, it would be easy to then come to a conclusion that founding involves a participatory inclusion of the sponsoring society. In the private universities, they are now called sponsoring societies, whereas here your lordship saw the history. My lords, my second point would be a brief point.
Yes.
As your lordships have noted, and the Aziz Basha judgment has also noted, MAO College was a minority institution. There is no doubt about it, and your lordships have been shown all the indicia for something being a minority institution. Well, lords, just a brief point related to this. The actual administration could well be part of the indicia to decide whether it's a minority institution. But it may well be that an institution that is to be administered after it's come into the status of a university may have an extent of regulation by which the administration, the free administration, may be restricted to some extent. That will only be enabling provisions restricted by in terms of reasonable restrictions. But that may not have any reflection on whether it is a minority character or not. If it is a minority character, the restriction will be limited. If it is not a minority character, maybe the restriction will be more liberal. But my lords, TMA Pi has indicated that where there is an unaided minority institution and an unaided private university, private institution, which may not be a minority institution, the difference in the extent to which you can regulate is very limited. Maximum freedom must be allowed to educational institutions, and what the maximum freedom that is needed for a minority institution is to carry the flavor of the minority institution, the culture and ethos of the minority institution. My lords, that is very, very critical. Then, my lords, if your lordships will turn just briefly to my written submissions, because